Hello, everyone. I'm happy to meet you again. I'm Dr. Louis Fouché. I'm an anesthesiologist and intensivist in France, and I'm trying to do a live show and broadcasting about the people I admire or whom I think the work should be on the scene and shown to everybody because it helps us understanding better the world we're living in. And today I have the pleasure to invite a friend and somebody I admire much, who is Mattias Desmet. Hi, Mattias. How are you doing?
Hey, Louis, doing well, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much. It's an important moment for us in France because your book is finally published and translated in France, which is something really important. It makes years that French people want it to be translated, and I'm going to show it to the public. It's there. It's with Yves Michel editions in French, and Yves Michel is a friend also, and he dared to publish this book. And I say he dared because this book has made noises in the Ghent University in Belgium. No.
Yes, it was. Well, it has been banned actually from using it at Ghent University, which is a strange thing, I believe, because the book is very, how would I say, it's written in a very friendly and kind tone, I believe, but certain things in the book uh, make certain people a little bit scared. The book is all about what I believe to be a newly emerging totalitarian system, which is like a globalist and technocratic totalitarian system, uh, which we see, for instance, in Europe when um, something like the Digital Service Act is introduced or the European Shield for Democracy. Like, at first glance, all these initiatives seem to be very democratic, as the names mention, but on a closer consideration, you can see that they actually show all tendencies of a newly emerging totalitarianism, which will be like a globalist, surveillance, transhumanist totalitarianism. So that's why I wrote a book, as you know, Louis, during the Corona crisis. But years before the Corona crisis, I was already studying the psychological mechanisms in newly emerging totalitarian systems. But when the Corona crisis started, I saw so many things that were reminiscent of totalitarian dynamics that I decided to speed up the process and finish the book and publish it as fast as possible.
Yeah, I put the reference of the book in French there at Yves Michel edition, and it's an occasion to introduce you to the French public who didn't know you. You're a professor in the University of Ghent in psychology, in clinical psychology, and social psychology, and a lot of your work has been inspired by Gustave Le Bon and psychology of the crowds. How do crowds react? Not only the individual, but when they are gathering together and kind of find uh, a common framework, a common way of being, and maybe you shall explain to us about that and what you call mass formation. But just before, I wanted to react on what you said of the banishment of your book and the fact that most of the people were really afraid during the COVID and afraid by the sanitary crisis, but there was something else, something more, something behind the scene that could be felt by the people who had intuitive vision of the world and felt that there was something nasty with the way the governments were dealing with the people, the way the media were telling us what's going on, and this word of totalitarianism appeared in a lot of different places in the world, and it reminded us of the work of Hannah Arendt about Nazism and about the Nazi and the Soviet system. But what I saw is around surrounding me, most of the people didn't want more fear. They already have the fear of the COVID. And when I was talking about totalitarianism or telling them to go and say your work, they were more afraid, and they said, "No, you cannot say that. We're not uh, in North Korea or thing like that." Just like if there was kind of a protective mechanism in their psychology, trying not to see the whole framework, not the whole pattern, because it was too scary.
Absolutely. Yes. You know, maybe the most remarkable characteristic of newly emerging totalitarianism is the fact that the narratives um, in which people start to believe become utterly absurd. And the strange thing is that no matter how absurd the narrative becomes, people will continue to believe in it. And that's something that Hannah Arendt uh, described in her very important book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Like, in a strange way, people are not capable anymore of taking a critical distance of the narratives that circulate in society. And that's where my work begins, I think. As you said, I uh, referred to the madness of the crowds, la psychologie du fou, c'est dit
Oui.
as it is known in France, the work of Gustave Le Bon, who describes exactly this. He describes this strange phenomenon, which I coined the term for, of mass formation. Like, mass formation is a typical kind of group formation, which has very specific effects at the level of individual mental functioning. And, like, for instance, once people are in the grip of a mass formation, they typically will become incapable of taking a critical distance of what the mass, the group, believes in. Secondly, very important, they typically will be willing to radically self-sacrifice. That's something very strange. We could see that, for instance, in the Soviet Union, when the mass formation started. Suddenly, the leaders of the Communist Party, they when Stalin condemned them to death, or usually without any reason, they just accepted it, saying such things like, "Oh, if that's what I can do for the Communist Party, I'm very happy to do it. So please do what you want." So the strange willingness to self-sacrifice is very strange in a mass formation. And then thirdly, the most important thing and the most dangerous thing is that people who are in the grip of a mass formation typically uh, uh, become radically intolerant for dissonant voices. So everyone who thinks differently should be first excommunicated and later on exterminated. And, like, this can go quite far. Like, there is a conversation of me on the internet with Shoref Eshtali, a woman who lived in Iran during the revolution in Iran, and who had to witness. She was the daughter of one of the mayors of a major city in Iran, and she had to witness on Friday evening how people were hung. People who were supposed to be traitors were hung by the regime. And one evening, she witnessed how a mother who reported her own son to the state uh, hung the noose around the neck of her son when he was on the scaffold. And once after he died on the scaffold, she was very proud to receive a medal of for heroinship. So that's the dramatic end stage of a mass formation. And once you understand the mechanism, you understand why mothers start to report their sons to the state and children start to report their parents to the state. And you also, and that's of course the most important thing, you start to understand what the only thing is that you can do when confronted with a mass formation.
I emphasize what you just told us. First point is no distance, no critical distance from the wholly absurd things told by the system. Secondly, a self-sacrifice for this to maintain this collective hypnosis and to maintain the system. And third, the sacrifice of the others and the excommunication and then the murder of the people who are trying to warn about the absurdity or the incoherence, or who are trying to fight to fight the different hierarchy of this new framework of this of the civilization of the society. And I can hear with those 3 points there is kind of a loss of the moral reference, the usual moral reference. When you tell us that a mother can say his son is guilty and watch him being hanged and receive a medal and being proud about that, it reminds me of the Red Khmer teaching the kids to kill their own parents,
Yeah,
and as a new normal, as we heard it during the COVID.
exactly. In a certain way, there is a moral awareness in the masses, but it's only a collective morality. So that's a strange thing. Like it is as if individuals completely lose their awareness of their individual interests and also their individual ethical awareness. But at the same time, there is like a group awareness which becomes extremely strong, and in which people are willing to sacrifice everything for the collective. So that's a strange thing. It's extremely important to understand that, like, many people talk about totalitarian systems as if they are a kind of dictatorships, which is not true. They are completely different. In a classical dictatorship, the psychological mechanisms are very simple. It's like, so people are scared of a small group of people whom they experience as having a huge aggressive potential, and consequently they just accept that this small group of people unilaterally imposes its social contract to society. That's a classical dictatorship. And like in a totalitarian, when a totalitarian system emerges, something completely different is happening. First, you have this mass formation, this process through which a certain part of the population, usually something like 20-25%, becomes so fanatically convinced of a certain narrative and a certain associated ideology that they are willing to destroy everyone who doesn't go along with that narrative. So that makes, and once this mass formation happens, and once it seized control of the state apparatus, then something typically at that moment, like once a mass formation happens and seized control of society, or of the structure, the state structures, then it typically will be able to impose like a much more suffocating doctrine to society than a classical dictatorship, just because the totalitarian state has a huge secret police at its disposal, namely this part of the population that is willing to report everyone to the state who doesn't buy into the narrative. Like that explains why like in former Eastern Germany, like it turned out after the collapse of the communist system, it turned out that up to 30% of the people had joined the secret police, and like almost everyone had been, people could look in their files after the system collapsed, and almost everyone could see that he was reported to the state by a family member. Yeah, almost everyone. So that's what happens in a totalitarian state. So that's why it is so important to understand what this mass formation is and how it starts. And maybe we can take some time, like a few minutes, to go into it, to talk about this how a mass formation emerges. Like,
Yeah, just before you speak about that, I try to rephrase to just check that I understood it well. But you make a difference between usual dictatorship and totalitarianism. Usual dictatorship is a kind of a story of balance of power. You have weapons, you take the power, and the people are bowing in front of you because you can kill them. But that's all. They don't need to buy into your narrative, into your ideology, your religion, or anything, and they don't enroll you in their own ranks. You are fighting against them. So this is dictatorship. But totalitarianism is kind of a pervert way of taking the power, because it makes you get into the power at the same time as it makes you it puts you into jail and in all the fields of your life. So you told us that the family were were involved into making another member of its own family being guilty. And we saw in France, like 5 or 10 years ago, appearing the idea of vigilant neighbors. In every neighborhood, you had an eye, a very disturbing eye. This was the symbol of it, and it told the people you are connected to the police, and among you there is one person who is responsible to give the information to the police, and it's for your security. We are
exactly.
checking all your neighborhood, and we are reporting everything which is happening, and you can make part of it. I don't know if it exists in Belgium, but when I saw that appearing in France, I saw that it was not. It was really the borders between the different categories of the society were collapsing. The usual citizen were turning into policemen or secret services, as you said.
Yeah, that's something that is one of the main characteristics of a totalitarian state, which is not there in a dictatorship, and which emerges everywhere. So that's very important. Like, um, to understand, like, the complexity of a totalitarian system. In a classical dictatorship, for instance, it can be a solution to kill a part of the dictatorial regime, because the point of gravity in a classical dictatorship is situated in a dictatorial regime. The problem with a totalitarian system is that the point of gravity is situated in the masses who are in the grip of the propaganda of the totalitarian regime, meaning that even if you eliminate a major part of the totalitarian regime, usually nothing will change. Nothing will change because you still have the masses who are in the grip of the propaganda.
So you tell all the people who are listening to us that it's really useless to go and kill any member of the parliament or of the government. It's not the point of gravity as you see it to
No,
change things.
to the contrary, violence always fuels totalitarian dynamics. And that's why it is important to understand how it emerges. Like, the most crucial thing we have to understand, or the most important psychological phenomenon of the last 200 or 300 years, is what Hegel, the German philosopher Hegel, called the atomization of society. Society is falling apart. People start to feel more and more disconnected. People start to feel more and more lonely. And just before the corona crisis, uh, the percentage of people feeling lonely was like somewhere around in between 40 and 60% worldwide. Like, Theresa May appointed the Minister of Loneliness because she acknowledged this problem. The US Surgeon General mentioned that there was a loneliness epidemic. So very important. And then once people feel disconnected and lonely, they will typically start to struggle with lack of purpose and meaning in life. And we could see that was also very clear. Like, up to 60% of the people worldwide reported that they considered their own job to be a so-called bullshit job, a job without any purpose or meaning. And thirdly, once they are in this state, disconnected, lonely, lack of meaning making in life, something typically happens at the affective level, at the emotional level. People are confronted with with what I call free floating frustration, aggression, and anxiety, meaning a kind of anxiety that people cannot connect to a mental representation. People feel anxious but they don't know what they feel anxious for. And once people are in this state, it's in this state, and that's, I could refer to the wonderful work of Jacques Ellul in this respect. Once people are in this state, or that's the state where propaganda is very effective. Jacques Ellul didn't really go into the psychology of it, but I believe that's what it all boils down to. Once people are lonely, disconnected, lack of meaning making, and develop high levels of free-floating anxiety, if at that moment someone distributes a narrative through the mass media indicating an object of anxiety and a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, like lockdowns to deal with the virus, there is a very good chance that all this freely floating anxiety in society connects at once to the object of anxiety, which is indicated in a narrative, and that people will be willing to buy into the strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, even if that strategy is utterly absurd. So that's what happened. In
Yeah,
the
because
Soviet Union,
from the moment on, they buy on the propaganda, and they have a reason for this free floating anxiety. It's not free floating anymore. There's a reason for it. There's a sense and a meaning into their and in what they're doing. They're fighting against an infection. They're fighting against Russia or whatever. They have an enemy, and they kind of solve the problem of isolation and loneliness because they are connected to the others, repeating the same ritual narration. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So it's actually it's exactly the same mechanism as what happens at the individual level. When an individual is confronted with free floating anxiety, he might very well develop like an obsessive compulsive symptom or one or another hysterical symptom or something, exactly because the symptom connects the anxiety to a mental representation. Well, in a mass formation, exactly the same happens, but at the collective level. So the mass formation is like the formation of a collective symptom, which in this case means, for instance, in the corona crisis, suddenly all the anxiety was connected to the virus, and people were willing to buy into these, in my opinion, rather absurd corona measures, which, like, from the first week of the crisis onwards, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm also a statistician, and from the first weeks onward, I could see, and I published a paper about it in the first week, like, these statistics are absurd. And no matter how much or how many times I tried to show that to people, most people absolutely didn't want to see it. So this process of mass formation in the beginning stage, it shows us in a baffling way that people are not rational beings in the first place. People are emotional beings, and what they are looking for in the first place is not a narrative that is correct or from a rational point of view. It's a narrative that allows them to handle their emotions and their anxiety. So that's the first stage. The first stage of the mass formation is this process in which emotions are controlled in a more efficient way because of the mass formation. And then the second step, which you refer to already spontaneously, the second step is indeed that because so many people at the same time participate in a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, people start to have the feeling of fighting a collective heroic battle, like the war with the virus, the war with Russia, the war with the Jews, the war with the aristocracy in the Soviet Union. People start to have the feeling that they fight a heroic collective battle, and they feel connected again. It seems as if they escaped their loneliness. I said it seems. That's crucial, because they didn't really escape their loneliness. Like, the very famous solidarity in the masses is actually not a solidarity, not a kind of love between individuals. It's a solidarity of an individual to the collective. The longer a mass formation exists, the more it sucks away all the love, all the solidarity between individuals, and injects it, replaces it by a solidarity between the individual and the collective, meaning that after a while, the solidarity with the collective, the bond with the collective, becomes much stronger than even the strongest bonds between it, between individuals. For instance, the bond between a mother and her child. So that's what happens in a mass formation. It's a terrifying process where all the energy is sucked away from the bonds between individuals and injected in a bond with the collective. That's why in totalitarian states, when Stalin died, millions of people were weeping and lining up at his funeral, even when they knew that he killed one, two, three, four of their family members. It's a very strange phenomenon, which is it's so important to see that in the final analysis, and that's what my book is about to a large extent, in the final analysis, the only remedy against totalitarianism and mass formation is the act of sincere speech. The people who are not in the grip of the mass formation, which is the majority, because it's only 20 to 30% which is really hypnotized. Like, mass formation is identical to mass hypnosis. It is mass hypnosis. I could go into that in a technical way, but it would take us too far, I think. But once you understand that it's technically speaking a mass hypnosis, and that only 20 to 30% of the people fall prey to it, then you could see that the only solution is that the people who do not fall prey to it continue to speak out in a sincere way. Like, not in an aggressive way, not trying to convince the other, because that doesn't work. Much more important than trying to convince the other is just testifying to what you feel inside. Saying, like, look, you do believe in this narrative. Okay, you can do that. But to me, it feels wrong. And I will try to articulate what I feel inside and why, to me, this doesn't feel right. So Gustave Le Bon in the 19th century mentioned that already, that when a major mass formation emerges in a society, there is always a part of the population that doesn't fall prey to it, a major part. And of this, like 70, 80% of the people who do not fall prey to it, a very small percentage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10%, is willing to speak out because they feel it's dangerous. And only a small percentage of the people is willing to speak out. And when these people speak out, when these people try to wake up the masses, Gustave Le Bon said, they will typically notice that they don't succeed in waking up the masses, that the masses continue to weigh into the narrative. But, he said, the fact that they cannot wake up the masses doesn't mean that their voice has no effect. It has an effect. It makes sure that the masses do not go to the last stage of the mass formation, where the masses typically destroy each and every one who doesn't go along with them. So that's why it is so important to continue to speak out. If you continue to speak out, if enough people, a few percentage, don't have to be that many, continue to speak out, they will prevent the masses from going to the last stage, where the masses destroy each and everyone who doesn't go along with them, and finally also themselves. So when people continue to speak out, the last very destructive phase will be avoided.
That's one important point, because a lot of persons told us during the COVID, and that all what we did to resist the narrative was useless, and the agenda was still going on. And I can't help but thinking, but if we hadn't done what we did, it would have been much worse. And we knew this moment where maybe the army could enter in the schools and mandatory vaccination for all the kids. It was that close, I think.
It was that close.
Yeah.
They were really building camps. They had these plans to build camps for the non-vaccinated. Like a lawyer in New York showed me everything about that, and he said, like, we were that close to the point where the people who didn't want to go along with what happened were referred to camps.
And so the demonstration on Saturday morning, all the people trying to sing together, make music in Quebec, in France, and in Germany, in Belgium, I think it was really much important, and we should not think that it was useless. Most of there's a kind of a natural history in this mass formation and totalitarianism, and there's a very close connection between this mass hypnosis and totalitarianism. It's not two different; they cannot live together, separated. I mean, and what's the natural history of the end of totalitarianism? Is there kind of a natural collapsing of it? Is it at one moment it's disappearing, the narrative is over,
Yes.
nobody buys it anymore, or because for the moment we can see kind of an echo of the first mass formation, and just like in a when you have a movement of earth, or a volcano, you have
Mm.
replics, in we say in French, I don't know the name in English, but it's doing it again
Mm.
several times, and we saw COVID, we saw Ukraine, we saw Gaza, we saw there's climate change and things like that. Um, the mass formation is continuing whatever the narrative is. It doesn't depend on the narrative. It's just a pretext, but the mass hypnosis is still going on.
No, of course, of course. So, and it's very, from a psychological point of view, it's clear why it's continuing. Like because in order for a major mass formation to emerge, you need a lot of lonely people. Okay, that's what you need. Like a lot of disconnected people. That's why the mass formations have always existed. Like the Crusades and stuff were examples of mass formation, or the witch hunts in the 17th century were examples of it. But they were much smaller and shorter lived. Like they didn't last that long. And now, since the 19th century, mass formations became a bigger, larger, stronger, lasted longer, and that's exactly why they could become the basis of a completely new state system, the totalitarian state. So totalitarian states did not exist before the 20th century because the mass formations didn't last long enough to build a state system on it. And now they last longer and longer. And the point is, like, uh, um, that's because of the percentage of lonely people that is increasing. There are more and more lonely people, more and more profound disconnectedness, and that's why the mass formations become stronger. But the problem is that every mass formation creates even more loneliness. Okay, so it prepares the ground for the next mass formation, which usually might be a little bit stronger and more aggressive. And um, that's what you could see, like in 2022, suddenly the war in Ukraine started, and like from the one day to the other, the corona narrative lost its psychological power. It was replaced by a new narrative. Psychologically speaking, all the anxiety that was first connected to the corona narrative was switched and was attached to Putin or the Russians, and so that's why. So, and when will it stop? Of course, it's a good question. When uh, mass formations in totalitarian states are always intrinsically self-destructive. Okay, so that's the good news. They are intrinsically self-destructive. But of course, the challenge is that the point is that they should destroy themselves before they destroy the people who do not go along with them. And that's the fatal mistake that happened in Germany and in Russia. Uh, uh, the people who resisted the system at a certain moment, 1930, in the Soviet Union, 1935, in Nazi Germany, at a certain moment, they decided to go underground and to stop speaking out in public space. And that's the point where the totalitarian system becomes completely destructive because there is no dissonant voice anymore that disturbs the hypnosis. So that's happened in 1930. The resistance stopped to speak out in the Soviet Union. Within 6 months, the destruction campaign started. In 1935, exactly the same in Nazi Germany. So there was emerging totalitarianism at many other places in the world. And there, it didn't continue. it didn't develop into a fully fledged mass totalitarian state. Probably, there are several reasons. Like countries have to be large enough for a totalitarian system to be able to emerge, but even countries that were large enough, sometimes or usually, the totalitarian system did not really go to the final stage or did not really emerge, and probably because there were people who continued to speak out. So that's what we have to learn from history. Stopping to speak out and going underground is not a solution. Of course, you can go underground to a certain extent, and it's good to form parallel networks. Perfect, something that has to happen, but not in a way to hide what you are doing. Strangely enough, it's the most important thing is that, and definitely it should definitely not lead to a situation where people stop to speak out in public space. That's the most important thing. Continue to speak out in a polite, calm way, not trying, or at least everyone has his own style, but usually aggressive behavior, also verbal behavior, will be counterproductive. It's like an unwavering, stable, determined, sincere speech from the soul that is most effective against totalitarianism. So that's probably, you can, if you look at it from a different perspective, like for instance, mass formations and totalitarianism in the end are the logical consequence of our rationalist, materialist view on man and the world. Yes? And this materialist view on man and the world, which believes that the human being is merely a material, biochemical entity, which it absolutely isn't, but in the materialist view of man and the world, people believe that. That's what this view on man and the world says. There is no space for ethical awareness there. Like, ethical awareness is just stupid. It's like when the human being is a merely biochemical entity, in most cases, people will conclude from that ideology that life is a relentless struggle to survive at the material level. And in this relentless struggle to survive, ethical awareness is just something problematic. You don't need it. It will make you weaker on the battlefield if you have ethical awareness. And so the solution to totalitarianism is at the same time the solution to materialism. It's finding an alternative way to look at man and the world, which is not materialist, and which places ethical awareness in the center of our existence, where it belongs. In the end, in the final analysis, contrary to what the materialist view on man and the world believes, I believe we are ethical beings, and I believe that our existence will only make sense if we acknowledge that we are ethical beings. If we get out of our bed in the morning, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is not, what is the smartest thing I can do today? The first thing we should ask ourselves is, what is the best thing I can do today in an ethical sense? Where can I do something good today? Where can I mean something to other people, for instance? And that's the first question. And when I'm talking about ethical awareness, I believe that the first and most important ethical principle for a human being is the ethical principle of speaking sincerely. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. That's why I give all these workshops. Hundreds of people have followed them by now on the act of sincere speech. I believe that's the essence. And that's what we lost. We lost during the Enlightenment culture, last centuries. Propaganda became the organizing principle of society. If you read all the founding fathers of propaganda, that's what they all stress. We have to manipulate people. If we want to organize this society, we have to manipulate the population. And at all levels, not only at the level of the leaders of society, but also at the level of the population. Like, people lost touch with sincerity and truth telling. And that's what we have to rediscover. That's what we have to rediscover. What does it mean for a human being to speak the truth? And at the moment, and then we will see that the act of sincere speech and truth solves all the major crises at the same time. Like, it will recreate a true bond between a human being and its fellow human beings. It will recreate a new bond with nature, with society, with our own body, with our sexuality, and so on. It's the act of sincere speech that puts things in the right perspective and that connects things again. Each time, for instance, when you're in a group of people, small group of people, and someone speaks sincerely, that means someone finds the courage to show something that makes him or her vulnerable. Someone shows something that we usually hide behind what I often call the veil of appearances. At that moment, you will feel connection. You will feel that you can see another human being. You will feel that someone gave a part of him or herself through his words to you. It's that what creates connection. It's that what makes us feel for a moment that we really exist. And it's that what in the end is the only remedy for loneliness, mass formation, and totalitarianism.
Sorry, I lost my microphone. Thank you much for this beautiful message, Matthias. I think it's a important and a precious take-home message for all the people listening to us. And they can find your book not only as a workshop about how totalitarianism is setting up and what are the frameworks of it, but how to solve it at the same time and to get back our true speech, our sincere speech, which make us feel connected to each other and being a human again. And the precious thing about that is that we feel in peace and joyful when we start to speak to have a sincere speech. We're not pretending anymore. We don't wear a mask anymore. We don't wear a social a role. We're not daughter, sister, father, boss, or anything. We are ourselves, and we speak with our soul. So thank you for this how to do message. I have a last question before we leave each other. Uh, Now in France is happening kind of a crisis with the farmers, and the cattle is slaughtered massively by the authorities. And so we can find that this mass formation and this mass hypnosis is going on with the sacrifice of the cattle. They're not sacrificing humans, but they are killing all the cows. Um, and we can feel that a lot of people who didn't see how wrong it was before are starting to see it in plain light now. It's
Mhm,
obvious because it's absurd, because it's nonsense, and the mass formation, I think, is not working there. The people are
mhm,
not buying it, and it's
mhm,
um, and the farmers are revolting. They're rebelling, and but you said that the violence and the rebellion were fueling the totalitarianism. Would you have any advice or any reflection about what's going on in France now for the farmers and the people surrounding them?
Yes, of course, non-violent resistance is the best strategy, I believe. Non-violent resistance. So definitely resistance and definitely refusing to participate, no matter where you can, is extremely important. But the violence is almost always used by the system to create more support for the totalitarianism itself. When the people who resist use violence, they make it actually very easy for the people who make the propaganda to justify aggressive, repressive measures against the people who protest. So the point is, Louis, resistance is crucial, but non-violent resistance is more efficient than violent resistance. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe it can be two the two parts of the same coin. Some people are resisting to protect the cattle, and they need to resist uh, also with violence because they receive violence very harshly,
Mm.
and the other one should bear the message with non-violence. So I think
Yeah.
we need to help our farmers anyway. So for the French people
Yes.
listening to us, it's an important point so that we can still have a connection to nature and be fed by people who have um, an intention of doing well in their job. It's not agro-industrial industry who is going to feed us with something good, but the real peasant and family farmers. And so thank you much for all what you're doing. How you do you plan to pass to spend time in France and do workshop there or conferences, or how do people can find your job and your work? There's
I'm
this book translated in French, but I know there is a Substack also.
There is a Substack, yes. There is a Substack indeed, French Substack. Um, yes. And at this moment, I still don't have a website. It's a little bit strange, but I'm not very much into technology, but I'm constructing one at the moment. So there should be a website soon. There is no workshops yet in France or abroad. I only give the workshops in Belgium and Holland, but I would love to bring them to France one day. And I will let you know, Louis, if it's yeah,
With pleasure. If we can share
yeah,
that, and maybe you can try and speak in French because I know you understand
yes,
it, but
yes,
you're shy in with the concept in France maybe, and
yes,
it's easier in English.
yeah,
But I think that would be important that you come in France and have speech there, have sincere speech there. So Dieudonné is helping a lot. You can see there the name of Dieudonné there, who is helping translating the
yeah,
Mattias works and
yeah.
publishing in its own Substack and also on his website. And you can find the book there at Yves Michel edition. Um, I
Wonderful.
think it's important to share that with everybody around because we heard a lot about totalitarianism, but I think you're the one giving one of the um, most efficient framework of it because it's not only about complaining and saying, "Oh, poor us, we're gonna all die in the totalitarian
We
storm."
won't. Mhm.
But you open ways of resistance and so solutions. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Bye bye.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Louis. And hope to see you soon in the new year.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Bye bye.